Hello and welcome to another Paul Batey's Tales of Amazement. Thank you for downloading and listening to me once again. Nice to have you here, whether you come from TuneIn or iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you're coming in. Welcome. We live in a weird old world where everyone gets offended. And if you speak your mind, you're ostracised, and none more so than if you're involved in anything to do with men's rights activism, MRA, whatever you call it. If you say you support men's issues, and we're talking about things here that I think people can agree with. Circumcision is bad. Family courts are unfair. The criminal justice system is unfair. Men might be CEOs, but they're also on the streets. It's a weird old place we live in at the moment. And one person that's going to join me in a second is one of the main figures of hate and hope in the men's rights movement, Paul Elam, from A Voice for Men. You can see his website, voiceformen.com. He's got a couple of YouTube channels, A Voice for Men and also An Ear for Men. Paul does counselling as well. I'd say he's qualified for the job, So I'd like to say hello to Paul Elam. G'day, Paul. How are you going?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, pretty good. Now you've spent some time in the UK recently for the International Men's Conference, which I believe you organised in conjunction with Mike Buchanan of Justice for Men and Boys over there. How did it go?
Well, I was there, and I have to say, to set the record straight, the organization was 99.9% Mike Buchanan. My part was to help MC the event, to do a speech there, and to shake a few hands. But that whole event, which was very successful, by the way, was Mike's work. He's
quite a guy, Mike. I've been watching a fair bit of his interviews on his YouTube channel recently, and I don't know. And it's the same with you, because I dip in and out of men's movement. I'm a men's counsellor, but I'm not as active as the likes of you or Mike. And you see Mike having to answer the same fucking questions and the same shit time after time. Where do you get your strength from? Because I know you've been through the ringer in the past. How do you what's the term, rise above it, or how do you not let that get to you, Paul?
Well, because I'm an asshole. No, I mean, in all seriousness, that is a perplexing situation, because what you do get, for lack of a better term, when I've talked to the media, when I talk to people that are unfamiliar with men's issues, the questions I get typically range along the same unimaginative, thick-headed way of saying, well, what do you have against women? Or what about women's issues? As though we haven't been talking about women's issues endlessly for the past 50 years or more. And so that is our biggest challenge. We live in a very dumbed-down culture that gets their information from sound bites on television. And, I've seen my share, not near as much as you have, but I've seen what passes for, intellectual exchanges on issues affecting men in Australia. And it is pretty sad, although that seems to be changing recently with the likes of Bettina Arndt and Colleen Barraclough and other people who are out there beginning to write a different narrative. But it's the problem all the way across the board. People scratch their head at the idea that men might have problems.
I heard Bettina Arndt for the first time the other week, and she was talking about domestic violence, and she absolutely nailed it. She was pointing out that this is the thing that really pisses me off about the whole feminist narrative, is the way that they take statistics and either get rid of the men out of the picture unless they're doing bad things, or greatly inflate them. And Bettina was on the money. She was saying, well, you know, and this is from my own experience in counselling as well, that the vast majority of domestic violence is two people that have both descended into a pit of their own personal hell. And it's really pointless saying who started it when it gets that far.
Oh, absolutely. And there's a number of other reasons why not to care who started it. One, you're absolutely correct. The greatest amount of domestic violence is reciprocal. It's mutual combat. Two people lose their cool, and the problem is rooted. Now, according to feminists, of course, the problem is rooted in patriarchy and dysfunctional, toxic masculinity. Of course, none of the research actually bears that out. What we know is that domestic violence is a multi-generational problem rooted in family dysfunction, childhood abuse, issues like alcoholism, substance abuse, poverty, underemployment, undereducation, mental illness. I mean, there's a wide range of things that contribute to domestic violence, and none of them are gendered. We also know, now I don't know what the numbers are in Australia, but in the United States, 70% of unidirectional violence, in other words, violence where there is one person hitting another and the other person doesn't fight back, 70% of that domestic violence is perpetrated by females. And that is not, by the way, an argument saying that we should look at it as a female gendered problem. It is still a family problem, a multi-generational problem, and because the domestic violence industry's bread and butter is built on selling images of bruised and battered women huddled in the corner in the dark crying with no help, that's what gets people to reach for their wallets. And that's why you have organizations like White Ribbon Australia making a killing off of selling this lie about what domestic violence is. And I'm really glad to see people like Bettina Arndt, Miranda Devine, Corinne Barraclough. I'd like to see a man come out and do it. But so far, it is some of the women in Australia that are finally coming out to challenge this bullshit narrative.
Well, I mean, I think it does take women to come and say these things sometimes, Paul, because if you're a guy saying these things, you are going to be, you have to be prepared to you know, you've got to have a really thick skin on you. You really do.
Yep.
I mean,
you do.
The other day, I was reading some of Dr. Warren Farrell's stuff. Who's you know, he was one of the not the starters, but he was one of the major figures in the men's movement. A former feminist. I mean, most of the guys I know that are men's rights people all come from. I was a feminist back in the day.
So was I.
You know,
yes.
It's and then so I saw how Warren Farrell had been what's the word I'm looking for?
Ostracized
or defamed in the most horrible, vicious way. And I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, Warren Farrell is the most, you know, lovely, soft-spoken, intelligent guy you can get. And he was attacked in the most vicious, vile way. So, you know, sometimes I think that the old vagina pussy pass has to be used because, you know, we've got penises and we're just going to get taken down, Paul.
Well, let me offer one. I'm going to say I agree with you like 99%. I mean, I don't think there's any assailing your logic, but let me offer another dimension to that if I can.
Sure.
And this is speaking as an American. My country was founded on a group of men that were willing to hang for what they believed in, to declare independence from the throne, which made them traitors. It made them treasonous. It made them hated by many, many thousands of people. And if they had lost their battle, they would, as Ben Franklin said, we must, you know, hang together because if we don't, we shall surely all hang separately. They knew that they were signing their own death warrants in order to make a nation independent and free. I can only imagine And I know that there will be guys out there, and I mean some active, very decent guys in the men's movement who have to operate anonymously that will be upset at my saying this. But I'm sorry if somebody says, oh, I'm not going to stand up because somebody will say bad things about me. Well, what the fuck good are you? I mean, what the fuck good are you? I mean, you're not an activist. And I understand still, I have people on staff at AVFM in high-ranking positions that don't use their real names for very good reasons. And I understand it. I mean, it's not like I don't sympathize with it. But if we're ever going to get serious change on men's issues, it is not going to be because we hide behind the skirt of Bettina Arndt and let her do the talking. And that's just another dimension to this. And it's not necessarily at all to disagree with what you're saying. These women are very valuable and vital to our movement.
So a question I get asked a lot, Paul, is, okay, look, men are largely in government. Men are largely, in quotes, in control of things. Then why? How can we say that men are behind the eight ball? Let me flesh that out a little bit. If men are in charge, then how did we get to a state today where men are getting fucked over in the workplace, in the criminal justice system, in family courts, medically, in every facet of life? Why
because
are men
in charge? Well, yeah, you look at it this way. I mean, understand one, there's sort of two answers to that question. One, this is a feminist argument. 98% of the halls of power of corporate CEOs, of government, of all forms of true power in the world are totally male dominated. And they are absolutely correct.
Yep.
That is true. I mean, you certainly can't deny it. The question becomes, one, why? And feminists don't like the answer. One, because the percentages of male geniuses, the people capable of running the world, are so predominantly male. If you look at study the bell curves of intelligence, you find that you have genius and morons stacked about evenly on both ends of the bell curve, where most of the really, really dumb people in the world are men, and most of the really brilliant, ingenious people are men. And women's IQs tend to be spread in the middle of the spectrum. So that's why you have prisons a lot of times, because you have prisons full of men, and you also have congresses and parliaments full of men because of that distribution of intelligence. But you also have to look at the bigger picture in what's really happening in governance, because looking at men in government and saying they have all the power is like looking at women in grocery stores and saying they have all the food. That's a quote from Jack Kammer, by the way, from his book, which I highly recommend to anybody. If men have all the power, how come women make all the rules? Men, by and large, compete with each other. I mean, sure, you look at the American Congress, and I'm sure the Australian Parliament, you see almost entirely men. Yep. Does that mean that that's a boys' club and they're making rules for other men? No. These guys are in competition with each other, and they're actually more invested in taking care of their families and in their constituents, which are also women. To say that men are in power and are using that power to benefit only men is absolutely insane. All you got to do is look at the prison population, look at the numbers of men that are working in shitty, dangerous jobs for low wages.
Or living on the street.
Yeah, or living on the street or committing suicide. And you know that percentage of men, that 0.1% at the very top, is not there running things on behalf of all the other 99.9% of men. That's a ludicrous assumption. So if people want to know why men are in charge, it's because men are smart enough to be in charge. And women know that. That's why they overwhelmingly vote for men. But if you want to equate the power elite as though that it applies to me and you, Afraid not.
Well, I'm not a CEO, and I don't feel particularly oppressed or disadvantaged by that. Because
Well, I am a CEO and I'm still broke.
can you remember, Paul, the first time you stuck your head above the parapet and got some flack for it? Is that something that sticks in your mind, where you started thinking perhaps, wow, what the hell have I got myself in for here?
I can tell you exactly. It was October of 1993.
Shit.
I worked at a place called Five Oaks Residential Treatment Center in Houston, Texas, a residential program for adults and young adults with substance abuse issues. And I had read Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power.
Good book.
And, oh, yeah, great book. And one that, and, you know, I'd walked around for a couple of years before that. And this is during the days that I was feminist and was starting women's tracks and women's programs and trying to call attention in my profession to special issues faced by women in treatment. I was the whole gung-ho 9 yards. I mean, I wasn't today's Tumblr brand of crazy, but I was absolutely feminist at the time. But I knew there was something wrong, Paul. You know, it was just like one of those things from the Matrix movie. I knew there was something wrong with the world, and I never could put my finger on what it was.
Yep.
And I read that book, and everything sort of clicked into place for me. And within a week of reading that book, first I walked around for a week pissed off at myself for not having noticed 90% of this stuff before. And once I got past that, one of the first things I noticed was that in our assessments of clients coming in for residential treatment for substance abuse, that we evaluated every woman that walked in the door as to whether or not that she had a recent history of being victimized by domestic violence. And we evaluated every man on whether or not he had been a perpetrator.
Man.
But we did not evaluate any women on whether or not they were perpetrators, and we didn't ask any men if they had been victims.
Wow.
And I thought about that. I thought, you know, that's really sucks, because I knew I had heard male clients talk about their wives beating on them. And I knew that I had women clients that were just as violent as they could be. So I took that into a staff meeting and told the whole group, this is about 18, 20 other professionals, everybody from office staff up to psychiatrists that were running the place, and say, I got a question. I want to know why we never ask men if they're victims or women if they're perpetrators. And the hostility was instant.
Yep.
For even asking the question. People looked at me like I was crazy. And as a matter of fact, my boss at the time, his head swiveled around like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. And he said, where did that come from? And I just said, it comes from my interest in my clients' well-being. Why aren't we evaluating these people for both perpetration and victimization of domestic violence? And watching it was just bizarre. The whole room, you just saw the collective consciousness shift to change the subject quickly.
Yeah.
And people never regarded me in the same light after that, at that facility where I worked. There was a sense of friction, and it only got worse because, of course, I didn't shut up.
It's incredible, isn't it? The way that, you know, I mean, that was a question coming from regard for human beings, both men and women.
Yes.
That wasn't saying, well, what about the fucking bitches then? It was no, well, we've got to do right by everyone.
No, and it was mainly a concern for their children.
Sure.
Because kids don't care who the perpetrator is. If they're growing up in a violent home, they're being damaged. And if we're not asking about their violent mothers, then we're just leaving those kids out to hang in the wind.
Well, this is where things like domestic violence, or this is where it's learned behavior. Now, if anyone's listening that's interested in this, go and read Duluth, or go and look at any domestic violence website in your area, and you will see that they regard the problem as being purely men attacking women because of patriarchy and oppression. They give no weight at all to things like drug abuse or all the factors you mentioned before, Paul. It is purely a gender issue, and it's just, you don't have to be a psychologist or a scientist to make sense of the idea that kids growing up in a shitty home have got a greater chance of carrying that behaviour on. It's not cast in stone, but it's the biggest influence a person can have in their life is how they're brought up.
Oh, absolutely. And we knew that. I worked with chemically dependent populations. And one of the things that we just was as plain as the nose on your face is that in chemically dependent populations compared to the average population or any other control group, you're going to see a massive spike in domestic violence. And just like you just said, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to make sense of that. You've got inebriated, intoxicated people with emotional and mental health issues. You're going to have more violence. It just happens that way. Yet the very professionals that are charged with treating these issues, most of them are convinced that it's patriarchy. It's absolutely insane.
It makes no sense whatsoever. And if feminists really did care about women, and look, I don't mind the idea of feminism in that having a lobby group for the rights or the interests of women, I really don't have a problem with that at all. It's when they shut everyone else up and shame everyone else up and say that if you're interested in men's rights, you're a misogynist, you're a rape apologist, shut up, shut up, shut up. By the way, feminism is for everyone. Then they can kiss my ass, really.
Yeah, well, feminism for everyone isn't an invitation; it's an order.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't really engage with feminists much because they always say the same thing. Feminism is about equality, and then you try and you cannot reason with these people. It's a very difficult. And I don't think it's a very productive thing to do, is to try and persuade feminists. I think the hope for men is to get the message out to the wider population. Now your approach on Voice for Men, at times I'd use the word strident, Paul.
Well, you're actually being quite diplomatic.
Why have you taken that approach? Why is that your bag, or has been your bag in the past, Paul?
Well, I went into A Voice for Men with the idea that there was no other way. And, history may prove me wrong. So far, I think it's proving me right. But I'm somewhat of a student of the men's movement. This goes back over 100 years.
Sure.
To the Belfort Backs and so many men in between who have tried Belfort Backs was, he and I would probably be good friends today because he was just as plain spoken and abrasive as I was. But in between him and what is happening with the men's rights movement now, 100 years later, what we've had, with all due respect to wonderful men like Warren Farrell and others, we've had this button-down collar approach of, let's talk about men's issues over latte and scones, and we'll have a nice, quiet conversation, and we'll figure out solutions together, both men's advocates and feminists. Well, that is a pipe dream, and it's silly on its face.
Well, it's done nothing, has it, Paul?
No, the moment Warren Farrell, as a board member for the New York chapter of the National Organization for Women, the moment he started speaking about men's issues, they totally ostracized him, cut him off. His speaking circuit died. And he's the most reasonable. We jokingly call Warren the Mr. Rogers of the men's movement. And that's an affection. It's not meant to insult him. He's done a lot of great work. But what I've seen over hundreds of years, they tried to have a men's international conference on men's issues in Vienna in 1929. And women's advocates and traditionalists shut it down
Wow.
before it ever happened. There was a conference on men's issues in St. Louis in 1994, and they did manage to have it, and the career of every professor that spoke there was destroyed completely and totally after the conference. We are dealing with a vicious enemy. This is not a cultural debate. It's not a polite, reasoned way. I think it was Mark Twain said, you can't reason somebody out of an idea that they didn't reason their way into. You just can't. Feminism's ideas, patriarchy, these things are not reasonable. There's no rationale to them. They are purely emotional, victim identity ideas that have set in like to cement to the minds of a lot of academicians and a lot of feminist advocates, and they're not going anywhere with them except with hostile resistance to anybody who differs, and it doesn't matter if they're polite or not. So what I decided to do from the very beginning with the Voice for Men was to put on a persona, because, if you read some of my writing there, you might think that I'm sitting around here up to my knees in empty beer cans, throwing ashtrays at my partner, telling her to make me a sandwich. That is not me in a personal way, but I wanted a rough, aggressive, unapologetic persona out there, strident, as you put it, bombastic, offensive, refusing to retreat, because that perspective, it's like dealing with Nazis. They're not going to pay attention to or respect anything else. They have to be confronted with a voice that won't be silenced and that won't be cowed into saying, oh no, we have to be polite. I can't tell you how many organizations, and I won't name any of them here out of respect, that put me as a blind copy on their group emails. They want me to see and distribute what they're doing, but they don't want anybody else to know that they're talking to a Voice for Men or to Paul Elam, and that's fine. I mean, they have their role to play, and they're making progress, and they're doing good work. But the real progress in changing the narrative took some ball busting to get it done. And that's something, I'm happy with.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something I found that there's no point in being reasonable with these people.
No.
In some respects, it is a bit of a war going on now, and I'm not using that word as hyperbole, because I mean, look, okay, let's look at some of the ways that men are disadvantaged. Right. First of all, in the States and in most countries, they make the army, they go and get shot. There's far more men that are out on the streets homeless. I saw a poster in Melbourne in Australia, and it was whinging about 25% of homeless people are women. Like, what the fuck are the other 75 that you don't give a shit about?
Yeah, that is a very interesting way to tell us that 3/4 of all homeless are men.
Yeah, you have a ridiculous amount of incarceration for men for non-violent offences, particularly in the US, where you've got the justice system that just seems to bang people up for. I mean, the war on drugs has been a big part of that over there.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. We've got 5% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated.
Sure, and so people may say, well, men must be more violent, and or more have a more criminally minded pattern of behaviour, which, given that most morons are men. I'm not so, just as most geniuses are men, most fucking scumbags are men as well. There's no doubt about it. But
well, that I don't know. I think the jury's out on that. But I think you can make an argument for it. Yes.
But the fact still remains, for an identical crime, women are much more likely to either get no custodial sentence whatsoever, or if they do, I know the UK figures are that women will be sentenced to around about 50 to 60% of the same sentence as a man. So of course the prisons are going to be full of men, because women are rarely found guilty of anything, and if they are, they don't get locked up.
Yeah, the stats in the United States are that for the same crime, men are sentenced to 66% more time. They are twice as likely as women to be incarcerated to begin with for the first crime. And once arrested, they are twice as likely to be prosecuted. The sentencing disparity in the criminal justice system between men and women is hugely bigger than the sentencing disparity between black and white.
Sure. So how does this come about, Paul? Because if you've got a male judge who's issuing these sentences, what is it about men? What is it about us that go lighter on women? If we're in charge, why do we not treat people equally? What is in us, Paul?
Well, it's interesting. One of the things, if you read, there's an article called Setting the Record Straight, The Real History of the Men's Rights Movement, written by Robert St. Estephe, where he goes back over 100 years. And one of the tidbits he pulled from 1910 or 1912, about the time that they were a decade or so away from the 19th Amendment passing and women getting the vote federally. And there was a sheriff the sheriff of the county of Chicago, Illinois, that said, I want the women to get the right to vote so badly because I'm sick and tired of watching all these all-male juries set women murderers free.
Wow.
And of course, in the United States, your jury service is tied to your voting registration.
Sure.
So that's how they draw the pools. They've been aware of this for a problem, but to me, it's gynocentrism. It is our innate human and cultural tendency to, if two people are drowning and one's a woman and one's a man, and you can only save one, too bad, guy.
Yeah.
It's why on the open seas, the rules of the seas, that women and children first, and it doesn't matter if the woman is a 90-year-old retired crack whore and there's a father there with 4 children to provide for, she's getting that seat in the lifeboat. We practice the same thing in our criminal justice system. We practice the same thing on the street and how we side with women perceived to be in trouble. Belfort Bax called it mock heroics, that we think it makes us brave men to side with a woman no matter what the circumstances. But of course, we know full well the whole time that in siding with a woman, we have the will of the mob behind us.
Sure.
It'll work every time. So I think that's what it is. I think it is that we are instinctively a gynocentric species that sees the protection of women in a very irrational way. And that's why I think it's more of an instinctive than a thoughtful reflex. And the only way we're going to get out of that is by educating our young men and women that sometimes our instincts as human beings. For instance, my instinct is if I'm starving and you have a cheeseburger, my instinct is to hit you on the head with a rock and take your cheeseburger. But we rise above that as humans in order to live in a system of law and order, which we should do. We can, and I think eventually will, do the same thing with men's issues. It's just going to take a lot of this cultural war to be fought to get it done.
Well, you're talking there, Paul, about the value of men or how men are valued in society. And, I've got to say that, I think men are viewed as expendable. They're more disposable than women. And look, I don't really have a huge issue with that. I get the biological rationale why, women and children first and all that. I don't think it's right, but I can see why it's there. The thing
Sure.
One of my main concerns at the moment is, and I think we're still riding on the upswing of feminism. I don't think parity is in sight here. because there's more and more of a push to criminalize normal male behavior or normal human behavior. And I'm talking specifically here about rape laws that are changing in the UK. It's starting to happen in Australia, and it's happened in US colleges and some states and colleges about affirmative consent. Now, this is what feminists do. They'll take something that sounds reasonable, that in your gut you think, okay, yeah, I get that. So, I mean, no one likes rape, and the idea that men's rights people are rape apologists is fucking offensive. I'm offended,
Sure.
Paul. I'm triggered. And so, and then
We'll try to create a safe space.
Oh, thanks. I need some puppies and cookies. So at a raw level, I agree, rape is horrible. But then they change how rape is defined. They'll say, okay, well, there's a problem with knowing if there's consent, whether that's taken place. And there's part of me that goes, okay, yeah, I get that. Something needs to happen to make it clearer. And then they just go absolutely fucking ballistic and come out with a law that says, and this, if you're listening in the UK or Australia, you might think I'm talking bollocks here, but go and look at this and look at the commentary about this. Actual grounds for sexual assault or rape in US colleges, it says that affirmative consent means you need an affirmative yes at every stage of sexual contact. So can I kiss you here? Can I kiss you there? Can I unbutton your blouse? And furthermore, it doesn't matter if you've been with a girl or married to them for 25 years. If you don't ask every time you do something and get a yes, you're a rapist. So feminists, when they say all men are rapists, well, according to their definition, yeah, I'm a fucking rapist. There's been times where I've been with a woman and just, we've gotten it on. We haven't explicitly said, and of course it's me that's doing the raping, even though she hasn't got a yes out of me. It doesn't mean that she's a rapist. It's really dirtying the act of.
Well, no, that makes you a rape victim. I mean, we've all been rape victims.
For fuck's
we're all
sake.
rapists.
It's I think it comes down. I might be drawing a long bow here, Paul, but I think it comes down to the leaders of the feminist movement actually believe that all penetrative sex is rape. Now, I don't know if you go along with me on that one.
There is a portion of their population. They have a term for it. They've coined a term called PIV, penis and vagina.
Oh God.
And yep, I'm serious, and they believe all of it is rape. But I don't think that is part of the rationale that gets behind, like, yes means less, yes legislation in California, which basically criminalizes all sex. And people think that you're joking. People think that this is bollocks. Yeah, I want to reiterate your request that they start using their good friend Google and find out that they're wrong if they think this is not happening. It is happening. But I think that the main reason behind it happening in the minds of feminists is not that all of them really believe that all sex is rape. I think they want the sexual landscape to be turned into something very similar to the marriage landscape, where everything works for the woman, where it's rape if she says it was. I think that they want to weaponize sexual relations between men and women on behalf of women, so that you never know whether what you're getting into is a consensual encounter, or if it's going to be the next day she wakes up and says, gee, I had a little bit too much wine. I wish I hadn't do that. Oh, by the way, that's rape. And that is happening. Careers are being destroyed. Men are being incarcerated. Particularly academic careers are being ruined all across colleges, but there is a backlash finally coming. University of Chicago just recently put out a warning to all their freshmen that there would be no trigger warnings and no safe spaces on campus, which I saw as a real good sign. We're also saying that same university is being sued by a male student who had been expelled with essentially no evidence at all that he had done anything wrong. He went to one of these kangaroo courts they call honor courts. after being accused of sexual assault by his girlfriend.
Well, those courts, Paul. I mean, you use the word court.
Yeah,
you know,
I use that. I use that
but
loosely.
this is going back to the old slavery days in the US or pre-1960s, where a white woman could just point at a black man and say he raped me, and he would get hung from a tree. That's in essence what we're returning to, where a woman can just say, yeah, he raped me, and the guy will get kicked out of university. His name will be all over Google. He'll be in papers. He's fucked for life.
Yep, in the words of Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice that went through that ordeal with Anita Hill, it's a high-tech lynching.
Yeah, it is.
That's all it is.
And they still can't get their maths right when they say, well, 90% of rapes are not reported, and I think the latest figure they use is 5 out of every 2 women have been sexually assaulted. I mean, they just pull these figures out of their ass.
That is precisely where they get them. And again, I think we go back to the gynocentrism. If we weren't in basically a culture of male pussies that are willing to give up to women whatever they demand, these stats would have been laughed out of the public sphere years ago.
And look, I'm glad you said that, Paul, because my feeling on this is, it's not a problem with women. It's not a problem with just women or anything like that. It's men have done this as well. So when you talk about men being pussies, we all let this happen. The human race has let this happen. It's not just women are bad, men are good, or anything like that. We've just all sat back and we've eaten one slice of the salami at a time until there's situations. I mean, I hold my head in my hands when I hear about some of the ridiculous cases in the US where if a guy has been a father figure. I'm talking about Washington State here. If a guy has been a father figure for someone else's children, not his own, for 2 years, he has to pay child support. And if he doesn't pay child support, I mean, debtor's prison was supposed to have been a long gone thing where you don't go to prison if you can't pay your debts. This is an exception. Child support, which for a start, there's no way of knowing where the money's going anyway. It's probably going on fags and booze and a new boyfriend's fuel tank. Where a guy can go to prison for not paying child support for kids that aren't even his. I mean, fuck. These are the sorts of things where surely if you say that to someone, they go, that is completely fucked up. But nothing changes, Paul.
Well, and it's because, and again, I wish that I had a different case to make, but I'm obligated as what I think of myself as a rational human being. I'm obligated to follow the facts and to follow what I see and what I know to be true. We know, for instance, in many cases, I mean, there was cases that one that Crystal Garcia talked about that's going to be in the Red Pill movie that's coming out, where a 15-year-old boy was raped by a woman in her late 20s, and then she turned around and he was forced to pay child support. Out of that. It's absolutely insane. But these are not, by and large, women hammering that gavel down. It is not women who pass those laws. It's men. And I really think that we've got to come to terms with that. And I'm not saying that women don't have their share of blame in this. They do. But I think we also have to recognize the fact that if the kindergarten teacher leaves the classroom and waits a couple of hours and comes back, they're not supposed to be surprised that the kids tore the place up. And that is essentially what we've done. We've set up a system of laws. Men have set up a system of laws that I think ultimately reflect their competitive orientation with each other. Men crush each other through the legal system, and they let women have a pass.
Well, as far as men being criminals, I would say you could stop criminal activity overnight, women, if you refuse to shag anyone with a criminal record, and crime would stop. Because, it or not, we're chasing a pussy, and some women are attracted to that kind of person. So
A whole lot of women.
yeah, yeah, and you mentioned briefly there kindergarten as an analogy, but this is a real area that I'm concerned about is the way boys are treated in schools at the moment. That normal childhood behaviour is not tolerated. That you have to, there's
No,
school
they medicate them.
medical. Oh, it's. I mean, how can anyone as a human being not be, not have their heartstrings tugged? When I say that 1 in 7 boys in the US and in New South Wales in Australia are on some form of medication like Ritalin, which is a nice way of saying fucking speed. It's
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's an amphetamine, and it's been tied to liver cancer later in life. We know that there are powerful psychotropic medications that causes changes in brain chemistry. They can map them out on an MRI, and we haven't even begun to understand all the negative consequences of doping a boy because his single fucking mother found him too much to handle, or because his asinine feminist school teacher didn't want to manage his natural masculine behavior in class. So what? We put him full of potent psychotropic medication that may end up later in life killing him, for all we know, just as a matter of convenience. And again, overall, if men were not tolerating this, it would not be happening.
sure. I mean, the war on boys is such a it's a real concern because we're seeing the results already. We're seeing how and look, I'm not going to go on an anti-woman stance, but this is the way I see it. This is the life I've lived. So this is my experience. This is the truth for me. We're living in a society where women from the day they're born are told you're always right. Boys are told that they're always wrong. And so what you're ending up with, and some of the clients I have, they're dealing with issues later on in life that I got out of my system when I was 15, Paul. The level of emotional maturity in men and women these days has sunk. I don't know. Maybe there's just too much food and not enough war in the world at the moment. But we've become so soft, and so when you've got any human being that's being told that they're right all the time, they're going to grow up and be fucking borderline. They're going to have zero empathy for any human being around them. And I see this more and more and more. What's the answer, Paul? Do you see any hope for this?
Well, that's what happens when you remove fathers from the home.
Oh, it's shocking. It's shocking.
Because it is fathers that offer, and I don't mean with a belt or a hard hand, but it is fathers who offer discipline, accountability, responsibility, empathy in the lives of children. It is fathers who role model that.
Or not give a fuck if they're, or not think it's a life and death matter if their kid goes out and scratches their knee.
Exactly. And I mean, there's so much. I mean, Warren Fell wrote another book called Father and Child Reunion, in which he digs meticulously into all the research. What is happening to our children from absence of their fathers is catastrophic for them, and it's catastrophic for our civilization. We do have a bunch of soft kids growing up into soft adults. And it is, I'll be honest with you, I don't see anything really changing about that without some sort of social collapse that puts men back in absolute necessity and puts a premium on their existence.
The last stat I think I saw from the US was that 34% of children are raised without a father. Is that right? Or?
That seems about right. I don't happen to know that exact number. I guess I should know it, but it is somewhere around there. And I think if you look at the divorce rate being about half, and if you also look at the number of fathers that are now alienated even within their own homes.
Sure.
And this is getting to be more and more frequent now because we are raising, I mean, I'm going to use the language I would use with just two guys talking. We're raising two generations of boys that are pussies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that are afraid to say no to a girl and who kowtow to them. And they end up many times cohabitating or getting married, and they live life as a footstool inside the home. And that's what their children grow up seeing, that mom is large and in charge, that dad has no self-respect, and he becomes the whipping boy for the family. So this is a vicious cycle. It doesn't even take a father being removed from the home. You can destroy a father inside the home, and the effect is going to be about the same on the children living there. It is horrifically unhealthy. It is causing all kinds of damage. And of course, we see a bunch of idiot social scientists running around saying, gee, why do we have so many gangs? Gee, why do we have this problem? Why do we have that problem? How come men don't want to get married anymore? We actually have people asking, like they don't know, why men are opting away from marriage.
Well, if anyone wants to see that in an easy-to-read book, Dr. Helen Smith's Men on Strike sums up pretty much the major reasons why men don't want to get married anymore.
Yeah, because it's stupid.
The best you can hope for, if you're lucky, you can have a man cave somewhere. It's like you don't even own your own house anymore. You have a little fucking room under the stairs, living like Harry Potter, where you can have your neon Budweiser sign and a dartboard, and that's it. That's
you know, Seth, it is so funny you brought that up, Paul, because I've been in my list of to-do videos that I do for my Ear for Men channel. The man cave video is one that I have on the list to address, and you're absolutely right. A man cave is nothing more than an affirmation that you don't own your own home. It's your little corner where you could actually have what you want, and that's it.
But not for too long, Paul. You can only be in there 2 hours.
Yeah, or something like that. And most guys are not even lucky enough to have a man cave. They just deal with the fact, I mean, my God, and I can tell you from personal experience, when I was the M word many years ago, we're close to the end. I went through my closet and I found like I had about 4 pair of jeans hanging up.
Yeah.
Everything else in the house wasn't mine.
Well, it's preparation, Paul, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, that's what I call career development. I thought it was just stupid at the time, but after I did a little waking up, I realized it was me that was stupid for ever having lived that way to begin with.
Yep. Unbelievable. It's, the number of times when my kids have birthday parties and I have to take them around someone's house and I go into this house and I think, no man lives here. it's a house, it's a castle of figurines and doilies.
Oh, yes. Yes, if you walk into somebody's living room and there's stuffed teddy bears on the sofa.
Oh, my God.
Get the fuck out.
So look, I think you're right. There is a backlash because some of and I'm going to lump the whole social justice movement in with feminism. It's all Marxist claptrap, cultural Marxism, talking about, if I've got an iPhone and you haven't, that means I must be oppressing you, all that sort of batshit insane bullshit. When they don't know when they're going too far because they get away with so much. But when they do overstep the mark, there is a bit of a little bit of a backlash. There's ideas being floated in the UK where the domestic violence register, where if 2 women accuse a man, it just goes, it's no criminal conviction, no nothing like that. We don't want to have any due process involved with this, but they can go on a domestic violence offenders register. So a new girlfriend can go and look at this register. The thing is, this register is only putting men's names on the list, or this is the idea. It's criminalizing all men. We are all bad. this is where it's going at the moment. And
That's been the feminist agenda for 50 years, is to criminalize masculinity
well,
and to demonize it.
well, you know, you look
And
at
now they're seeing it expressed in law.
well, you see stupid ass phrases like toxic masculinity. I mean, what the fuck does that mean anyway? It's you know, being a man, you're a bad person. That's the way we are seen. We're seen as bad people, especially when you're involved in speaking out for men. You know, you're instantly classed. Paul Elam, you talk out for men. You talk out. You must hate women. It's like, oh my God, how many times? How many times do I have to explain that talking up for men and talking about issues that should be important to everyone, like fucking circumcision, for God's sake? You know, cutting babies' dicks. Why is speaking up about that? Why does that instantly make people like you, like me, like Warren Farrell, like Mike Buchanan? Why does that make us the bad guy?
Well, I take a certain pride in that. I mean, the culture is sick. And if I were viewed as a good guy in this culture, I would really be worried about where my
Very true. That's a very good point.
And I do got to differ with you with one thing. Take one good long look at David Futrell, and you know there is such a thing as toxic masculinity.
Look, you know, I mean, I think we've got the same opinion on the whole pickup artist thing. You know, they're a bunch of psychopathic dickheads that put women on a pedestal at any cost.
It is hard for me to, you know, I wish I could argue with you on that. I really do, because I do think that the PUA community is also just a lot of very insecure men, young men who have not had real father figures in their lives. And they have turned these hucksters, people like Roosh and other assholes, into father figures.
Sure.
And I think they're being preyed on.
Absolutely.
But as sure as, you know, we're both here, Paul, every man, the only part of every solution in life is owning your own shit. And if you're going to choose a life where you're running around groveling and begging and figuring out how to manipulate just to get a woman to say yes, if that's your priority in life, then you're going to have some shit coming to you, and my sympathy is going to be in very short supply.
So are there any major happenings on the men's front? I know you've had the men's conference in London, and hopefully there'll be one next year as well. Are there any other things that are taking place, Paul?
Well, yes, we are coming to the Gold Coast next year.
Oh,
ICM 17, June 10th and 11th in Gold Coast, Australia.
See, that was me being because
I know you were trying to give me the nice segue into there, and you did a great job.
No, I didn't know if that was public yet, so I was keeping my gob shut.
And the tickets will go on sale in mid-October. We have some very surprising speakers, which I can't divulge now, but all I can say is that I believe when you see the lineup of speakers at this event, you're going to smile very broadly.
Absolutely. Well, I'm definitely gonna go there. I'm gonna take my kids there as well, Paul. My two girls are gonna go to a men's conference.
Oh no! Aren't you worried about the rapist there?
Oh, come on! Fuck's sake! It's just, oh man. Anyway, I think we've been going an hour, so we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time, Paul. And just again, where can people get hold of you or see your videos and all that shtick, Paul?
My channel on YouTube is An Ear for Men. You can find me at anearformen.com. You can also visit anearformenforums.com, which is a forum for men that I launched about